Hello, it's Kat with Kat's Oracle Shop. Thank you for joining me today. We have a very special guest, my friend Louis Closs, who is a Vedic astrologer in the UK. I am a Western astrologer practicing 13 sign true sky sidereal astrology. Now, my friend Louis here is going to take a deep dive into what's called divisional charts. In Western astrology, we focus on the birth chart, the transits, and progressions. Louis, would you please explain to myself and our viewers a little bit about Vedic astrology and the different charts that you guys really kind of take deep dives into?
Yeah, okay. So Vedic astrology began with the Vedic civilization, which was the late Bronze Age civilization, equivalent to the Celtic European civilization. And they really got into observing the nakshatras, or the asterisms, which are the smaller portions of what in the West we call the star signs, or the constellations, the 12 constellations. Okay, so they really got into propitiating the deities. They saw these nakshatras really as deities, or they saw the deities within the nakshatras. And a lot of their rituals and everything were based upon these deities of the nakshatras. And so that's really the beginning of the culture. And you could say the Vedic culture was astrological culture in that regard. And then later on through time, migration of peoples and everything, and the Greek civilization translating or bringing their way of doing astrology to the East, and the Hindu civilization incorporated a lot of those ideas, and really the birth chart and the way we see it now is a Greek Western thing, but it's been very expertly combined into the really very complex and curious Vedic Hindu systems. So they've taken that Greek birth chart and those 12 constellations, and they've really made it their own, and they've embedded it within the nakshatra sidereal system, and it maintains being a sidereal system. It is not a tropical system, and so yeah, and that's what Vedic astrology has become. It's become this hybrid thing, whilst maintaining a very authentic sidereal ancient system.
Oh, what a beautiful way to put it. And I really appreciate you bringing up the fact that you do use a sidereal system, because I think the only thing that's different is your chart sticks to the 30 degrees of the true sidereal location, where mine has a little bit bigger of a degree, but that's like minimal aspects. But let's take a deep dive into the presentation that you made today. So tell me a little bit about divisional charts.
Yeah, well, I guess this conversation started when you wanted to understand a bit about divisional charts. You were talking about primarily you were talking about the Navamsha, or D9. But let me first begin. Sorry, what are you saying?
Well, I was going to say, is that a look at the 9th house?
Yeah, we'll get into that. Let me just talk a bit about the concept of division. It might be a bit confusing to people who only look at the Western astrology stuff. I mean, it's confusing to me when I have to go through lots of translations in my head to make sure I understand it. Yeah, so the division is, so we begin with the birth chart. So obviously we have 30 degrees, tend to have 30 degrees per sign. And the division, the calculation of more charts based upon that is a kind of rather abstract, technical and esoteric process. But there are certain calculations whereby you halve the degrees. So say, for example, there's 30 degrees of Aries is 30 degrees. And so in the calculation for the D2, which is the second division, the calculation of that is based upon halving the 30 degrees and then having separate rulership of the 15 degrees. So either sun or moon rules the portion of the sign. It's rather complicated to explain, but basically there are charts that are generated, or chart placements, or different planetary placements that are extrapolated from these divisions. Now, the exact process of how that happens, I'll be completely honest with you, I don't have that knowledge, because I've been looking for that information about how you get from this. So I can show you here in my book, Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra, which is where a lot of the Vedic astrology that I practice is from this guy. But and it says in here about it gives you calculations first.
I myself have been looking for the calculations in preparation for this video, and I, like you, I haven't found anything. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. So can you see this full screen?
Not really. We can't.
Already. Anyway, in this book, it just shows you. Okay, it gives you this concept of so that it called the D2, or the second division, is called the horror chart, and that mainly deals with wealth and resources. So so it just shows you for Aries, there's you divide Aries into two halves, 15 degrees each. The first 15 degrees is ruled by Sun, second 15 degrees is ruled by Moon. And then it switches based upon whether the sign is odd or even. Now, that's not going to mean anything to you or to anyone, but basically, it's through this progressive division of the 30-degree sign that somehow, a chart is generated from that. I don't know about that process, but I know about the concept, and obviously, in this modern day and age, the computer system can generate all this stuff, and so I do have access to those charts. But just give me a sec. The idea behind this, I guess, is so the reason why they've developed this is to get some more detailed information about specific things. So, for example, you have the 12 houses in the birth chart, which in Vedic astrology is also called the Rashi chart, or the D1. And that in the Vedic system is mainly used to look at, it generates the houses, so it's mainly used to look at the physical body, the health of the individual, and general stuff about the personality and the type of person that is. It's also a jumping off point for all the other charts. So they've developed this complex method of finding out a deeper level of information based upon each house in the initial birth chart. And so for example, you know the second house in astrology is wealth, personal wealth, resources. So you're looking at the second house in the main birth chart to find out about your values and like you know, what you have, your possessions and so on. So they've contrived the method to get even more information about those things based upon this arcane calculation, and so on and so forth for third house. What about my siblings? You know, am I going to have siblings? Is my sibling going to die? Look at this D3 Breckener chart to find out about that. Will I have a sister or a brother? This kind of stuff. Fourth chart, Chatutamsha, which is can you tell you more about kind of stuff and possessions and everything like that. Saptamsha, which is the D5. So I guess this was to definitively answer questions about children when they needed that information to go, you know, am I going to get a child? When am I going to get a child? And so on. So they'll do this calculation to generate a set of information which will tell them whether that's more likely or not. Because when you're looking at the birth chart, it does not answer everything. They saw that as a chart that gives you a general overview and that it can't answer incredibly specific questions. So they developed a method to find out things like that, and so on. So so they have a chart for every house. Sixth house, they have a chart for health, the D6. For the seventh house, this is where it gets complicated because the numbers of the divisions don't add up completely to the houses. But I'm not going to bore you with that information. That's the general gist of that.
Well, what I really like about it is that in the Vedic system, they really take each house and go down the rabbit hole. Like today's, you know, the whole point of today's discussion is we're going to go down the rabbit hole of these charts. And I love how amazing the specificity that can come out of a Vedic chart. That's how you and I met. I found you on YouTube 4 years ago, and you've really opened my eyes to, you know, as an astrologer, I really like to take a look at different types of systems to see not only how we're different, but how we're also the same, right? And what's really amazing to me is that I've been applying Vedic principles to the Western chart. And the way I've been doing it has been a little bit differently, where I take that house and make it the ascendant and then basically run my chart. But it never occurred to me that you're actually having the house. So that's something I'm going to play with. But do you have an example so we can take these abstract concepts and actually take a... Now, the charts that I look at are wheel-based. So can you show me your charts, because they are a little bit different, and get us grounded as far as what we're looking at, because it's really interesting, and I really I think it's extremely pretty, for lack of a better way to explain it. But the Vedic charts are just put together in such a way that it's really pretty. So let's take a look.
Okay. So this is your chart. Kat, do you recognize it?
I do. I see my ascendant up at the top.
There we go. Yeah.
So I'm a Taurus ascendant.
Is this cursor working? Can you see the cursor?
It is. Yes.
Okay,
sir.
great. So yeah, go on. Sorry, I interrupted you. Taurus ascendant.
No, that's all I know is I'm recognizing the names of the planets, so I know where everything is. But I do know that I have Saturn sitting on my ascendant. Hey.
Yeah. He's
Shani taught
very
me.
much bang on your ascendant, isn't he?
Yes, we've become very good friends. Me and Shani, Saturn. Yes.
I mean, what I like about this chart is it kind of suggests that you basically are Saturn almost, because you have this exchange. See, Saturn is exchanging with Venus here in Aquarius, so it's really like a merging between that Venus and Saturn kind of
And
thing.
my birthday is on the 8th too. So I'm as an astrologer, a lot of us get into numerology as well.
Yeah.
And 8 is the number for Saturn. So I really physically embody Saturn in my life. And it's mind-blowing to see that Shani is everywhere.
Yeah, I was born on the 26th, so 2 and 6 is 8. So
Yeah, my daughter's a 26 too. So not only am I an 8, but my daughter's an 8 too. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So here's your D1 Rashi or birth chart, Kat, and that, like, when I went over it with you a few years ago, you got that overall look at your life, didn't you? And you understood all of your personality traits and which planet was responsible for each one, and which planet, not only the personality traits of each planet, which is each part of the soul, but like the specific things that could happen as an unfolding from that planet. So of course that always defers to the ascendant lord, which is Venus. So Venus determines the whole chart, and so the principal planets that we look at with the general birth chart is the ascendant lord. So very important to look at the ascendant lord also for general health and that kind of stuff, and also the sun tells us about the health and the body and the personality and the what the individual is like generally.
Yeah, I've always called the ascendant lord the master of the helm, but then I got lost in the Vedics, the nakshatras.
Yeah.
So my ascendant lord is Shiva, from what I understand, because it's Magrishi nakshatra. Is that?
Mugashi Nakshatra?
Yeah, from my ascendant lord. From what I understand, my birth time is
Yeah.
in the Magrishi nakshatra, which is the antlers, the head.
Mrigashara, yeah. The
Yes.
deer.
Sorry. The deer. Yes. The deer's
Yeah.
head. It's really, yeah. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, yeah. So you're on board with, what the birth chart is. And so I've got some notes down here. Hang on a sec. So down here you can see it's a little bit, I wish I could get a larger printout of the Navamsha. But here you can see it down here, this small birth chart. And then there's one here that is moon chart, but we're not going to bother with that one. Going to look at the Navamsha a little bit and try to, I guess, explain a little bit about that. So I've got some notes down here. Hang on a sec.
I'm watching the sunrise as we're talking.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah. Well,
It's getting all weird.
yeah. So the D9, also called the Navamsha, I thought it would be a good one to. This one always pops up in Vedic astrology discussions as one of the main charts, because there's a couple of reasons. One, people look at it for marriage and relationships to try to get more understanding about those things. So that would relate to the seventh house of the birth chart. So the seventh house needs to be understood as equivalent to the Navamsha or D9, but also because it's so nuanced, it's also the ninth. You also look at it to understand more about the ninth house in the birth chart. I'm not going to try to overcomplicate that. Just that's the basics of what that is. But the yeah, so obviously traditionally they would have gone, okay, am I going to get a wife or am I going to get a husband? Is it good? Are they going to be reliable, or like what are they going to be like? So they can arrange marriages, you know, and do all this kind of stuff. you know, try to find out, get the wealthiest husband or the wealthiest wife or whatever. This kind of thing. This is why literally it's like you open up the astrology chart and it says spouse. So it's like, oh, okay. It's very I think very designed to get very predictive kind of thing going on, but it is more than that, because we also look at the D9 to understand more soul related stuff, specifically to understand more about your dharma, and that's the purpose of the ninth house in the birth chart. So Kat, do you think Western people who are into Western astrology understand about dharma and this kind of stuff?
Not in that vernacular, not someone. So I know, because I've done so much research in the Vedic field, that I believe I understood what it, but could you give us a brief synopsis of what that is?
Yeah. So dharma is just your purpose, basically, your function, what you do, why you're here, like the meaning of why you're here. It's everything in life has a dharma or a purpose, and even like animals, plants, everything, they all have a purpose. They all have a reason to be here and a reason to contribute something. And we live in this interconnected existence where we're all trying to understand who we are. We're all trying to be who we are. Okay. And that's really the purpose of life. And the D9 in combination with the ninth house in the birth chart helps us get some information on that. And that actually trickles down to the fifth house, and then the fifth house trickles down to the first house. And it also goes the other way. So they are all embedded in each other, because 159 are the Dharma houses, and they're where we understand, the true purpose of our existence. We think the purpose of existence is money and getting stuff and security, and that we wouldn't be anywhere without that. We are literally our own resources. We are literally the earth. So that's the basic, right? But it's not why we're here.
Right. That's a capitalistic perspective of, the world that we're living in today. But, 2000 years ago, it would have been more about, the health and wealth of your family as far as food and perpetuating the lineage. But it's basically, from what I understand, the Dharma is what I came on this planet to pursue. If you don't mind, I'm going to shut this screen real quick. The sun's coming up really strong.
Yeah, sure.
Just wanted to take that edge off. I knew the sun was going to come out, but I didn't know it was going to be.
I've got a window. I've got a window right in front of me, but thankfully it's the afternoon, so.
Oh, well, that worked out. Yay. So I appreciate your summation of the Dharma, because I think that's what gets lost, is that we're not here just to go to work, pay bills. right? And consume, right? There's a whole, we are also spiritual beings. Like, we are energetic, spiritual. There's so much more going on. And this is what I love about charts reading, being an astrologer, is I'm finding out how unique each human is, right? And exploring the beauty of how different we are, but yet the same, because we are all one, and then finding harmony with it in that. And the whole definition of harmony is not being the same, but is
harmony. That's the exact word, Kat. Harmony. Finding your dharma, because it's a tricky word, it's a tricky concept to understand. It's very deep, but harmony is one of the best words you can use to understand this concept, because once you delve into your dharma and you understand about it, you're seeking that harmony with existence, and you're seeking your place in existence. So and Aikido, even though you might be thinking about martial art, the definition of Aikido is to be in harmony with the great energy. Okay, so that's why they practice Aikido, not just to do a physical thing where it's to find harmony with nature.
And harness that energy, right? Because we're like an energetic generator, for lack of a better way.
Yeah. So, and you can use other words like Thelema, the true will. If you're into that trajectory of spirituality and more of the occult side, the Western occult side, Thelema and finding your will is exactly the same concept as Dharma and Aikido. So these are just different ways. We don't need to rely on a Christian idea of things, but that too is exactly in line with what this is. If you have a Christian background and you want to understand things in that way and practice astrology as well, that's perfectly fine, because it accommodates that. You will have different terminology. You might say, okay, well, the way I understand it is God gives me that purpose, and through the connection with God, I find my meaning in life, and so on.
Their dharma, just in a different. That's what I love about it, is we're all saying the same thing. We're just using different vocabulary. And so I don't participate. For me, there's room for everyone at the table, right? And how boring it would be if we were all the same.
Yeah, I mean, and people get the idea that there's meaning. And people, I mean, you don't have to be on a spiritual journey to understand that there's meaning in existence. So you can come at it from quite a humanistic perspective. It's whatever. But people get that there's meaning and there's something beyond this. Now, I will say that there are other divisional charts that look at spiritual stuff, so this isn't the only one. You want to look at the Vimshamsha D20, might give you some more of the esoteric stuff. But the D9 will, obviously, in the 9th house, that's when we discuss that in the context of the birth chart, we often say, oh, that's where we understand about our teachings, our education, our teachers, and that trajectory of knowledge, and that trajectory of understanding. So it's really just that, but the way I like to look at charts is to understand that in a holistic kind of way. But yeah, I'm sure you and the people who watch your stuff, Kat, they understand the general basics of the 9th house.
And if not, we can always have another discussion to go into it. But what's interesting is we were talking about Saturn, and my 9th house is Capricorn, Saturn again.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is, so in your chart, Saturn is the 9th and 10th lord. And so yeah, Shani is your teacher, and Saturn is your teacher. So that you know, in a mundane sense, tells you about the kind of teachers that you might have in life, are Saturn-like teachers. And not everyone's going to have a Jupiter-like teacher. You know, Jupiter is the you know, the general way we understand teachers and teaching and stuff, because you know, Jupiter's the fun, creative, inspirational planet, and but not everyone is going to experience it like that. You know, they will have so for example, Kat, you might have to learn things the hard way because it's Saturn.
A little bit. Yep. But I will say, when the lessons are finally learned, they are ingrained in such a deep, it's built into my DNA, so that once I've learned and really, you know, grasped the concept of the teaching, you know. But what's interesting too, Jupiter is there in the house of Saturn. So
Yeah, yeah,
right, so it's a little bit of both for me.
yeah. Jupiter for you though is nothing to do with teachings or inspiration, really. This is the thing when we look at I know that in the Western astrology, obviously there's houses. This is where the houses came from. Well, actually, predating Greek, you know, it came from the Babylonian civilization, and the Egyptian and Babylonian civilization seem to have, you know, developed this idea, but then that became like Western. So the concept of house lords, you know, this isn't a big thing in Western astrology, but you still understand that the planet that rules the sign also rules a house, so that's the house ruler.
Yeah.
And there's a bit more nuance in the Vedic system, because we have negative and positive and neutral. There's a polarity given to these house lords, and so we have our good actors and we have our bad actors, and the bad actors, not literally bad, but they lead us astray, and they develop ego, and then the good ones, you know, the angel on our shoulder, leads us down that path of trying to understand who we really are. So Jupiter is actually inimical. There's an inimical relationship between Venus and Jupiter. So Jupiter for you, Kat, is not so helpful in a spiritual sense. So yeah, so we look at Saturn, but yeah, going to the Navamsha now. In the Navamsha, you are a, oh yeah, wait, what was I going to talk about? So Navamsha is 1/9 of a sign. So that's 1/9 of 30 degrees is 3 degrees 20. Okay, so they've extrapolated a chart based upon that calculation of 3 degrees 20. Don't ask me how it's done, I don't know. But you know, that's the idea of where the division comes from. But if you yeah, so there's 108 divisions, that's right, of 3 degrees. No, that's right. There's 4, I'm getting confused now. 4 times 27. Let me just do a calculation. Sorry, I was do
And
this
it's
later.
interesting you bring up the 108, because that's a pretty powerful number.
Yeah, sorry, I had this in my head. Hang on a sec. 27 times. Yeah, 27 times 4. So that's right, because there are 4 padas there are 4 3-degree 20 sections in each nakshatra. So this is where it gets complex. There's 3 nakshatras of roughly 12 degrees. 3 nakshatras that sorry, I'm getting in a muddle now. Right, let's stick to the 4 padas. So there's 4 sections per I can't remember it. Sorry. Let's leave that. We'll try to explain that later.
Yeah, I think you were talking about there's 4 padas within the constellation. There's 3 nakshatras within the constellation, and
Yeah.
within the nakshatra itself are different parts of that nakshatra. So you really dive deep into the different constellations. You go into the nakshatra, and then you even take that further into different sections of the. It's like taking a section and then taking a deeper look into putting that into more sections. Anyway, we can get lost in that math sauce.
Sorry, I think why I was getting confused was there's 27 nakshatras, but then there's 4 sections per nakshatra. That's right. So nakshatra is roughly 12 degrees, and there's 4 padas, which are 4 3-degree 20 sections. So you've got 3, 6, 9, 12, and then you've got 3, 6, 9, 12. Yeah, 13 degrees. So you've basically got 4 navamshas, which are these 3-degree 20 divisions per nakshatra. So if you times that by 27, you get 108 navamshas, or 108 3-degree 20 divisions. And 108 goes down to 9. And so that's why it's the D9, because, it's telling, it's the numerology of that connects with the 9th house. And when we're talking about ideas of the nakshatras, 108 and the number 9, we're talking about that deeper soul level of the individual. And yeah,
9's the number of that's the God's number. Now, what's interesting is I also practice ancient Egyptian pre-dynastic. I follow the lunar calendar, and they call, basically, rather than using the term nakshatra, they use the Deccan system, which I'm finding really line up with the nakshatras, but we could talk about that on another discussion.
Yeah.
Get lost in
it's always good to find out, have a variety of information. Yeah. Okay, so in this Navamsha, it puts you as a Leo ascendant.
Huh.
Does that make you think of anything off the bat?
Yes. Number 1, my middle name is Leona.
Oh, okay. Wow. Okay.
Second, I'm covered in lion tattoos, and lions have always been a big part of my artistic, just subliminally. The biggest tattoo, I want to say the second tattoo I ever got was a giant lion.
Okay.
And it's interesting because I'm going through I'm going through a 4th house year for me, which is all about Leo. So I'm getting in touch with my sun
Mm.
as I'm learning about who my sun is in my heart space, if you will.
Yeah.
Because I always said, oh, my sun's not that important. And by sun, I mean the luminary star in the sky, sun. And my nickname is Cat. So I'm
Oh, of
very,
course. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So and the Leona in my name is definitely played a big part of my life. So that's really, it doesn't surprise me that I'm a Leo ascendant in that chart.
Yeah. So I was going to say something. I don't know what it was. Oh, it's gone. Anyway, yeah. So what's interesting is the oh yeah, that's it. So apparently the Navamsha is the chart that you look at when you pass I think it's age 35 or something like that. So when you go into adulthood, the D9 or the Navamsha is said to be more important than looking at the D1. So you can, that makes sense, because if you look at the D1, remember it's 159 is what you're looking at for the Dharma or the purpose, and it's the 159 that we look at for personality traits and individual tendencies. So here you can see in the Rashi that you're a Taurus. That's the first house. So that's aggregate kind of personality where everything gets condensed. But then you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then you go to yeah, that's right, Virgo. Yeah, Virgo is your fifth house. Then you progress and understand more through self-expression and creativity. 7, 8, 9, and then go to school. You have some teachers, and you get a lot more understanding about who you are, and it comes back to the first house. So it's a cycle, and you can understand that through transits, through progression of the planetary periods. But it's just an idea of through life we gradually gain more understanding of who we are. So it makes sense that they say that the Navamsha is the chart that you look at later on in life. Whereas when you're a child, when you're a teenager trying to sort of figure out your personality, you're more based in that sort of first house place. Does that make sense?
Sure does. Yeah. You have to grow into that section. And it's interesting that that marriage is connected to that too, but I do understand that the ninth house is the house of the spouse. Is that?
Yeah. Let me just talk a little. I'll come back to that in a sec. But do you know about the Atma Karaka cat?
That is the planet that has the highest degree in your chart, correct?
Yeah.
And the Dharma Karka is the lowest degree, correct?
The what Karaka? Sorry.
I don't speak Hindi very well, but Dharma Karka is the lowest degree. Is that I found those Karkas really interesting and quite apropos as far as what they represented. Could you explain a little bit of that? Like,
the Atma Karaka is part of a collection of Karakas, which are called the Chara Karakas, and it's a Jaimini concept of movable significations based upon, like you said, like how high the degree is for the planet. But if we just stick to the Atma Karaka, it means the soul indicator.
okay.
And so in the birth chart, Sun is your Atma Karaka, it's at 24 degrees, so it's the highest one, and that makes sense because the highest is more like the soul, because that's the deepest, or the highest or the deepest, that kind of thing. So you see the correlation.
I
Leo
do.
ascendant.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, because I have like a noonday sun, basically. So my sun sits at the highest point.
Mm. And also, it's interesting that Sun is your Atmakaraka. You're a Leo ascendant in the Navamsha, but also the uh, the Sun is the fourth lord in your birth chart, and yeah, and so Sun is the fourth lord in your birth chart, meaning that it rules the fourth house, and the exaltation point for your. So this is quite technical. I hope people watching can keep up with this. So Sun is the fourth lord, and it's exalted in Aries, in the 12th house for you, Kat, which shows how. I mean, generally for Taurus, that shows how they need to get, how they need to lose that. Loosen that grip of needing to be secure and having stuff, because this is a Taurus trait, and they need to be okay with insecurity and not having stuff, and so this is part of the spiritual journey that the Taurus takes, and there are loads of clues in the Rashi chart, in the birth chart, about what is the spiritual purpose for this ascendant sign, and that's one of them, by looking at the exaltation sign for the Sun, because it tells you about how the Taurus needs to be less stubborn and less clinging to security. And so this is the learning progression for the Taurus, and so it's a spiritual lesson. So it makes sense, perhaps, that you have a Leo ascendant in the Vamsha, because it prepares you for that.
Yeah, and let go of control. Because Saturn's a big part of my ascendant too, right? And
oh yeah, controlling is like a lower thing.
Yeah, lower vibrational, sure. But it's really interesting because the past 4 years have been about letting go of everything, of who I've been, everything that I thought I knew, I learned that I didn't. And
yes.
so what I've been doing, particularly from the time that I met you, which was when I was really new to astrology, to now, I've completely taken it around the dance floor, where I let go of everything. Physical things, I've been going through this massive transformation, and it
I
it's
mean,
awkward, but it's been, on this side of it now, I can see the beauty of it, right?
yeah. I mean, I don't think the astrology is saying that you should be homeless, fourth lord in the 12th. I mean, I think that would be pretty
Absolutely,
hard.
no, absolutely, but not being identified with physical things. Like, it's my inner energy that I need to be connecting with, not external things, and that's what it has taught me.
Yeah.
Was that my love for myself and for my spirit, and needs to come from within rather than from any external source.
Yeah. So yeah, so you talked about spouse and and so on, and so the Navamsha is also saying, look, we've got an ascendant sign here as well. It's a small chart, and you don't have degrees in the divisional charts, and you don't have nakshatras, okay?
Okay.
But you still have house lords, and you still have rashis, and you still have an ascendant sign within the Navamsha, okay? So the way to understand it is that it's parasitic off the birth chart. So you're always going to have to be relating it to the birth chart. And it takes a while to get your head around it, to be honest. But you are, so because you're a Leo ascendant in the Navamsha, you're like a Leo person in relationships. So when you get into a relationship, your behavior switches more to being like a Leo, whereas on your own, or how you might consider yourself or your personality, will probably be like a Taurus. I don't know if that's your experience of relationships. I mean, Leo is quite a different kind of energy to Taurus. How do you have any ideas?
Absolutely.
I should say before you answer, Shani or Saturn would be like the kinds of people you attract into your life. So Saturn-like people, not just in relationships like in a sexual way, but talk about friends and partners and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because and that's one of the things that I love about astrology is that we realize why we become these different versions of ourselves during certain events, because I have always found myself kind of interested looking at myself from an outside perspective when I do enter a relationship, because I do become a very different person, not in a negative sense, but just that in an all or nothing sense. I don't like shallow connections. Like for me, it's all in. It's 100%. The heart is there, and the relationship is. And this is also with my friendships too, right? Is just being really dedicated to. And sometimes that has been a disservice to myself, right? Because I was so focused on the commitment that I had made. And then it was like, but are you happy? Right. So,
committed beyond happiness, just committed for the sake of it.
right. Because I made the commitment. So now I have to live with that. And it's like, well, wait a minute. I do get a say. And so I've taken the past few years to be single to really kind of get to know me, because how can I enter into a relationship if I don't want to do it unconsciously? Now, for me, I'm more aware, I'm more awake, and I'm moving into my relationships with a more conscientious of who that person is, who I am, and then a coming together of a mutual exchange, right? So it's been, and if I didn't ever value my son, which represents our heart, it makes sense that until this growth period that I've had, is I didn't realize the importance of the relationships until now. And so now I'm choosing from a different energetic space when I enter these relationships.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, when you said about commitment, that's definitely a Saturn thing. So having Saturn as your seventh lord in the Navamsha, that's certainly that's your being, very committed and like, till death do us apart. That kind of, that's shows you. So Saturn just doesn't just show you the type of people that you get, but it's also the relationship mindset. What's interesting, just skipping ahead a bit, is that you have the seventh lord Saturn in the 12th house in the Navamsha. So you have the planet of relationships. It's in the 12th house, showing loss of relationships, breakups, being alone, and Saturn is the planet of aloneness, and it's sitting in the 12th house, which is the house of aloneness, isolation, and this kind of stuff.
That's interesting. And I was married briefly, and he ended up passing away a few years after our divorce. And so that's interesting too, that that I enter into Saturn relationships and that it's sitting in the 12th house, because 12th house is the house of loss.
Divorce, passing away, this is all 12th house stuff. But that relates to Mars in your birth chart, because in your birth chart, see, we always have to relate back. Compare the seventh lord in the birth chart is Mars, and Mars is also the 12th ruler, because Mars rules Aries, and that's where your 12th house is. So for the Taurus, they have to, and I think I talked to you about this with your reading a few years ago, is that their spiritual part of their spiritual path is learning to let go of relationships, or just have, and that might come in just like a divorce, like you say, or that might come in death or whatever. That you know, some of these things we can't control, but the end result is that we gain a meaning from that, and it helps make us stronger. So the way that happens for Taurus is they need to become, you know, the general thing for Taurus ascendant is they need to become more independent and stronger individuals that are not so reliant on other people.
That's interesting, because that's been a big part of the past 4 years. I've really taken myself apart, if you will, and really looked at all the mechanics of what makes me me, and really taking the wisdom and then letting go has been a big part of the past 4 years. Letting go of that's a big part of the lesson that I've been on. Now I'm on the other side of it, so I've made peace with just being. If that makes sense, right?
And then you'll be prepared for anything, whatever happens. You could be alone or with someone or whatever, right?
Yeah, because if I'm not, from the very first breath we have to the very last breath, our biggest relationship should be with ourselves.
Yeah.
Right? Because at the end of the day, if I'm not fully understanding of who I am, how can I show up authentically in a relationship?
Yeah, you're just going to be sort of, I completely understand.
Yeah, I've always
That's exactly what I was going to say. I was going to say mirrored, yeah.
Yeah, I've always tried to mirror the other person and be who I think they think I should be. But the reality is, and that goes back to, but am I happy, right? It's like my needs are worth being known and valued.
Yeah, and I should explain to the listeners that this, the viewers, that the you know, I have to go through to understanding why these things are like they are, but the not everyone's going to be on a dharmic path in terms of like looking at astrology. This is a very geeky, very nuanced thing. It's very technical. Hardly any people are going to be looking at birth charts like this and talking the way we do about this. But people still have their dharma, and they just don't have it in this expression. But then you've got other people who dharma is not so important for them. Their dharmic path is not to have dharma be that important, and so they will be on a wealth trajectory, or they will be on a satisfying my desires trajectory, or they'll be on even worse trajectories, like real kind of bad stuff trajectory. And that's fine, because within all of those things is meaning. Meaning is always there. Dharma is always there. This is why Vedic understanding relies on the Purusharthas, the four aims of life, which are Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. Purpose, stuff or resources, desires, and loss of stuff. Okay, so it always begins with Dharma, and then at the end, there's nothing left, and you cycle round to the new beginning or the new purpose. And so within the 4 Purusharthas is the whole concept of reincarnation and this kind of stuff. So you have to look at the birth chart to understand how much purpose there is in even looking at the Navamsha. For you, Kat, you've got the 9th Lord in your ascendant, on your ascendant. So it's going to be important for you.
And that's interesting because until I found astrology, I call it sleepwalking. Like I didn't, nothing resonated with me. And I always felt that there was something. I knew one day I was going to find something that I was truly passionate about. And I fell into astrology. It found me, basically, is how I like to state it. And it's talking about going down the rabbit holes. This has been a true adventure, and it's really helped me understand a lot of things about life and other people too. It really helps me understand that we all have special, unique gifts, and that every human is exactly as they should be.
Yeah.
And it was through astrology. And
I just need to know that. I just need to know that.
Exactly. You need to have that bigger perspective, so that when somebody is behaving in a manner, it has nothing to do. They are meant to be that, right? So it's been a beautiful way to understand humanity in a different perspective.
Yeah, they're meant to be that, but if they don't know that they're meant to be that, they can cause a lot of problems.
And that's where grace comes in, because I was just like that at one point too. And so I just allow people to be human, and
Yeah.
then it gives me space to be authentic, and I can hold space for that person to just be themselves. And
that's very important. I'm glad you do that, because I can think back to when I was when I think back to when I was years back, I see how vulnerable I was, and I see the people in my life I had around me at that time who probably knew I was quite vulnerable and allowed me that space. Whereas if that didn't happen, I don't know, it could be much worse, right?
Exactly. And that's, and then also too, in the spiritual path, you understand that we're all one. We're all just each the version of the inside of me through quantum physics is connected to the inside of you, right? And we can get lost in that sauce too, but it's just,
well, that's interesting you said about quantum physics. That's exactly what the divisional thing is quantum, really, because you're going deeper and deeper into the thing, and it's actually kind of getting smaller and smaller. So it's interesting. I think this relationship with quantum, if people want some outside example to try to explain the concept of divisional, that can maybe help.
Yeah, and as an energy worker, some people call it witchcraft, but all it is quantum physics and understanding the laws of the universe, as far as the law of polarity, the law of mirroring. There's the law of attraction, and it's just understanding that we're energetic beings tapping into the subconscious, getting your subconscious in line with your consciousness, and then making sure it's led by the heart.
Yeah.
Is mind, body, and soul connection, basically.
Yeah. So I'm talking about the Navamsha as if there's like all these different house lords, and it could be kind of confusing, but we always got to go back to the fact that when we're looking at the Navamsha, we go back to the 9th house. So, that's, when it gets too complicated, you just go, just like in the birth chart, you go, when it gets too complicated, just go to Venus, because that's the ascendant lord for the Taurus, and that sets the whole chart. And so, in your Navamsha chart, Mars is the ninth and fourth lord. So, I won't talk about Mars right now, but I think if you look at this information for the first time, whatever house lord we're talking about, whatever house in here, I say like Sun is the first lord. We're still, this is the kind of mental gymnastics that it takes to go, into this thing. And for a few years, I wasn't really engaging with it because I was getting my head around all of this. So the only thing I could do is just go through it and simplify it, because you're not going to get all of this in one sort of thing. But no, just, I mean, how I've defined it is that, Navamsha is understanding your purpose and dharma. So, but aside from that, you read it like any other chart. Yeah. So, I mean, the other thing that I noticed in your chart, Kat, is that well, the second thing, apart from all of that Leo stuff and the Atmakaraka and so on, is that your ascendant lord Sun is in the 10th house. So your Sun is being ruled by Venus in the Navamsha, which shows that context for the Sun shows that achievement in life is really a motivating factor and very important for you. How would you and you can see that in the birth chart, because you've got the 10th lord in your ascendant, and here you've got the ascendant in the 10th house. So it's showing that achievement and success is a big part of your dharma.
Yeah, that's a big part. My work has been always really important to me as far as self-identifying who I am through my employment. And
Yeah.
that's been something that I've really had to take a look at and go deeper into that, because I always identified myself by what I did for a living. And there was
And
no
those,
space for spirit in there, right, at that time.
yeah.
And it's funny that Saturn is there, because I am a government contractor, and Saturn also represents governments.
Yeah.
So, and I work remotely for a hospital, which is also a 12th house thing. And it's at a different location. So I've been working, right. So like I work from home, but have to travel hours, 5-6 hours to get to work. And
yeah. So the 12th house shows that 12th house shows the hospital, but it also shows something far away. Is this what you're saying? Like
isolated, and I work by myself at home. And it's funny because I remember being a little kid, and I mean little kid, like 5th and 6th grade, and telling myself, when I grow up, I'm going to work from home. And I used to daydream about it. I remember sitting in class and like visualizing working from home. And here I am. I've been working from home since 2012.
yeah.
Pretty
So yeah, so that's interesting. Yeah, and obviously Saturn being the natural indicator of work, is going to tell you about that, as well as the 10th house. So Saturn in the 10th house, we look at, that's going to show us that those work things. So that's interesting. And then that gets, but because we're looking at the Navamsha, that's showing you how meaningful those things are for you. And I guess there's one thing that I missed that I want to get back to, but I think we talked in your chart a few years ago about the difference between being a workaholic and like and it being something that is purposeful and meaningful, because Saturn's your 10th and 9th lord, so it's built in. The nature of work is built in to your purpose and meaning. There's a difference, isn't there, between that and just being a slave, right?
And I've been both, right? And it's really interesting that you talk about that, because I was stuck in the chair at work and always afraid if I, didn't perform. I valued myself on how much I performed at work. And my personal relationships really were affected by that. And it was through the lower vibration of the feeling of lack. Basically, I was afraid that if I didn't pour all my energy into work, I wouldn't get any results. But work ethic has been always I've been working since I was actually 12 years old. The first job, yeah, and I even lied about how old I was. It was really interesting. So I've been working like a job since I was, well, more like 13. I think I was 13 when I told him I was older, because back in the 80s, you didn't have the internet to verify, your age and whatnot. But and then with my children, with the kids, the girls, it was important for me that they go to work, and that and now they have an amazing work ethic as well, that that I think that I helped embed that in them.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. That was a big part of, as soon as they turn 15, 16, it's like, oh, time to get a job,
Yeah, and that's important. Because that's the progression of Saturn, isn't it? It's like you at that very lower level, it's laziness and it's not really doing anything with your life, and then that Rajasic middle level is that good work ethic, and then, well, actually, going up into the Sattvic level of Saturn is actually that pride in your work, pride in a meaningful work, and that's probably the way it should be, because obviously if we weren't all serving each other, then there wouldn't be that much happening, and there wouldn't be that much going on. So obviously it's important, and Saturn's there to tell us that it's important. But yeah, he's not telling us to be a slave, and he's not saying, work yourself into the ground. That's a abuse of it. I think that's an abuse of the Saturn energy, I think.
Yeah, and I really had to learn.
It's a fine line, though, isn't it? You maybe can't tell sometimes.
Yeah, and I had to really tell myself that I'm allowed to have a personal life, that I'm allowed to have fun, and there's way more to life than clocking in and clocking.
Yeah.
Figuring out who I am and how I operate. And it really given me a whole new perspective about our relationships, because number one, some of the closest friends that I've ever had came through work, which is, Venus is in my 10th. Currently that I've known for over 20 years, and we only worked together for a short period of time. But to take that Saturnian approach to my relationships as well, right? And to, because Saturn also represents the masses. So it's important that I, number one, that I believe in the values of the company that I work for, because I want to make sure that ethically we're on the same level, which I think is a Saturnian thing. And also that they value my commitment to them. That's been important as well.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see. So, oh, sorry. The thing that I missed before, just going back to what I was saying about, for some people, they know that their life is not going to be, you know, Dharma's not going to have as much purpose for some people as it is for others, and so on. The reason why we look at the partner or the spouse, which is the seventh house stuff in the Navamsha, part of the reason I think is that marriage, or the idea or concept or principle of marriage, is a union with some other person, and that's sort of on some level almost equivalent to like a divine union. Like marriage is kind of like a you know, traditionally it's a similar kind of thing. You know, you're uniting with someone else and your ego is getting absorbed in someone else, and it would be under the, you know, that would be a religious and godly union as well. And so I think that in that way we can look at both Venus, because Venus is the, you have, Venus is important as the, it's difficult because Venus has all of these different functions. Not only is she the indicator of relationships, of desires, but also she's the ruler of the Navamsha. So you look at Venus for the overall understanding of the overall strength of the trajectory of the Navamsha. You look at Venus, but in addition, she's also a house ruler, like for you, the 10th and 3rd lord. She also is indicating personal desires, and she also is indicating like devotion and this kind of stuff. Also you look at it for relationships, just like the 7th lord. So it's kind of complex. It's kind of complex. But I just wanted to correlate the 9th and 7th houses, and also Venus and the 7th lord in the Dvamsha, as all in some way kind of forming the same kind of purpose or meaning. The other thing to look at is the Saptamsha, or the D5, because that's children. So a lot of people find meaning in life through children, and that makes sense because the 5th house, like I said, is a Dharma house, and that's where we see children. So relationship could be a really big thing in this chart for some people, and so you would look at the Navamsha, and if it was important in this chart, it would pop up in this chart, and that relationship could form a really big, important part of the meaning in that person's life. So even if they, you know, they don't know anything about astrology, or they're not this religion or that religion, or so on.
So it really sounds like, to kind of sum it up, because boy, we could really talk about going down a rabbit hole. We definitely have. This was so just to kind of give a summation of, number one, the topic that we're talking about is that through your natal chart, you take deeper dives into divisional charts to really ascertain in-depth perception, in-depth perspectives of what's going to be part of that person's life in that area that house rules, basically. And through that, you're using an ancient Vedic system that is pretty much unchanged, variations, I should say, for over like 5,000 years. That's what I really respect about the Vedic system, is that it's still in practice today. And through the ninth house of your birth chart, you're really able to dive deep on a soul level and a relationship level, as far as you say, our dharma of what we've come here to accomplish, and dharma being our life's purpose. Is that pretty much what you would say wraps up the ninth house?
Yeah. Yeah, generally, I'm just trying to find the path of your thought.
Yeah, I'm trying to sum up about our presentation
Yeah, yeah,
and basically articulate, number one, each house plays a different role in our lives, and what happens through that portion of our life. And
yeah,
I like to say we're a spaceship, right? And in our spaceship, we have 12 different houses that perform different functions.
yeah.
And these divisional charts take a real deep dive into each one of these houses and really looking at their function and how they're built.
Yeah, so it's going to show you, for example, things. For example, in your chart, Saturn is the ninth lord, and then Mars is your seventh lord. So, and then we've got Venus as well. So we need to look at Venus, the ninth lord Saturn, and Mars, which is the seventh lord. So your Navamsha chart is going to give you, it should, and this relates to the birth time as well. You can tell if the birth time's correct if lots of things in the Navamsha pop up that are in your birth chart. And this is one of the ways you can correct birth times, is by seeing correlations between the two, because this is parasitic of this, and you will just get a different, you will tend to get a different version of what's in the birth chart. For example, if relationships and marriage and stuff is not so important in your life, it's not going to be such a big thing in the Navamsha, so you probably won't be needing to look at the Navamsha, for example. There may be another reason why you look at Navamsha. You may be a very religious person, and you may want to still understand your purpose. It may just be that the relationship thing is not a big thing in your life, and that will show in the Navamsha, you know. And so it's a way of clarifying, I guess, and yeah, going deeper, clarifying, and you know, through there's even more detailed methods, like we haven't talked about the dasha system or the planetary periods. You can get specific understanding of what will happen, what's likely to happen in the planetary period you're going through. The Navamsha chart, there's techniques to see the unfolding of that thing in the Navamsha chart. So conceptually, it's a good conceptual tool, but also a predictive tool as well. Yeah, you know, does that help?
It does. And I really want to thank you for joining me at Kat's Oracle Shop for this. As always, Louis, you really come through with such an in-depth perception. As far as I've learned so much from you as an astrologer, and to me, you've always been a mentor. So I really appreciate you being you, because
No,
you've really motivated me to look deeper. You know, the first reading that you and I ever did, I needed to hear a lot of the things that you told me. And I really So I thank you for all your time and energy that you brought to Kat's Oracle Shop.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, we've literally just scratched the surface of that chart, you know. I mean, it's crazy.
Well, and that's why I appreciate that you brought up the Dasha system, because for future discussions, I would actually welcome you back to have a whole nother discussion just on the Dasha system. If you would be so willing to join me, I am more than happy to get up at sunrise and meet you at that time for you. So I really appreciate you taking the time today to meet with us on the 4th of July of 2024.
Independence Day.
Yes, and it's funny
Um,
that the UK we're talking. So.
But the yeah, I don't want. Last thing I want to say is I didn't want to reduce your dharma or your purpose to just being about work. This is there's a deeper thing going on in your chart, but you see the layers being peeled back, I hope.
I do, and if I'm going to stop recording in just a minute because I do have a couple private questions that I want to ask you before we go. But do you have anything else? By the way, if you would like to get a reading by Mr. Closs, they are in depth and quite interesting. Not to mention, you have your. Tell us a little bit about your YouTube channel.
Oh yeah, so it's very my YouTube is Karma and Consciousness. So you could just type in Karma and Consciousness Vedic Astrology onto YouTube. At the moment, I'm only doing really new moon to full moon videos at the moment. So less output than I was. But yeah, if you're interested in going along with the moon cycles and contemplating that, then you know that's what I do. I'm also on Instagram, Karma and Consciousness.
And I will have all of his information in the information box below. And I want to thank you so much for joining me today, Louis. And
Yeah, no
thank
problem.
you to all our listeners. And I appreciate your time, sir. And to all our listeners, I want you to know I love you. And thank you so much for joining us today on this lovely Independence Day. Remember, love each other because we're all in it together, right? Thank you, sir. And I'm going to go ahead and stop recording just 1 second. And you guys have a great day. All right. Take care.